Tom, from the Hook City Hooligans, from Lady Tanya O'Callaghan, from the Coverdale family. May the oceans, the rivers, the streams.
They were one of the biggest rock bands of the 1980s, selling millions of albums and filling arenas with anthems like Here I Go Again and Is This Love? But behind the glamour and screaming fans, Whitesnake was collapsing from within. Endless lineup changes, clashing egos, and the crushing weight of fame tore the band apart. And at 71, frontman David Coverdale finally admitted it couldn't last. What really caused one of rock's most powerful voices to watch his own band unravel? David Coverdale's story begins before Whitesnake during his time as the singer of Deep Purple in the mid-1970s, when that legendary band fractured and he was left to reinvent himself. In 1978, he formed Whitesnake, initially envisioned as a blues rock outfit inspired by his love for soulful vocals and heavy guitar riffs. The early lineup featured top British musicians, including guitarist Bernie Marsden and bassist Neil Murray, and together they crafted a sound that blended raw blues with hard rock power. Albums like Ready and Willing and Come and Get. It made Whitesnake a rising force in Europe, but it wasn't until the mid-1980s that they broke through in America. The self-titled Whitesnake album, released in 1987, was the turning point, fueled by iconic singles like Here I Go Again and Is This Love? The record went multi-platinum and catapulted Coverdale and the band into superstardom, their music videos dominating MTV, with Coverdale's then-wife, Tawny Kitaen, becoming a pop culture symbol as she danced across car hoods in the Here I Go Again video. But success came at a price. With fame came pressure, the demand for bigger tours, bigger shows, and bigger hits. And as Whitesnake's profile soared, cracks began to form within the band. While fans saw Whitesnake as a single, unstoppable force, behind the scenes the group was more like a revolving door. Coverdale was the heart and voice of the band, but almost every other position seemed temporary as guitarists. Drummers and bass players came and went with dizzying frequency, creating instability as musicians clashed over creative direction, pay, and recognition. Some felt overshadowed by Coverdale's dominance as the sole decision-maker, and by the late 1980s, the lineup that recorded Whitesnake's biggest hits was dissolving as the pressures of global fame worsened everything. Touring schedules were grueling, and the industry demanded follow-up hits to match their blockbuster success. Coverdale later admitted that the stress of managing so many egos while trying to protect the band's momentum became overwhelming, and as the faces on stage changed year after year, fans and critics began to wonder whether Whitesnake was truly a band or just Coverdale surrounded by whoever was available, a reputation that foreshadowed the collapse he would one day openly acknowledge. By the late 1980s, Whitesnake was on top of the world. Their 1987 album selling more than 8 million copies in the US alone, and the Slip of the Tongue tour filling massive stadiums. On the outside, it looked like every rock band's dream, but inside things were falling apart. Coverdale faced vocal problems requiring surgery, and the revolving door lineup reached a breaking point. Guitarist John Sykes, who co-wrote much of the 1987 album, was dismissed before the band's biggest moment. And later, Steve Vai was brought in for the Slip of the Tongue era, bringing a flamboyant style that clashed with the band's bluesy roots. The pressure to repeat success strained everyone, and Coverdale admitted, "I was surrounded by amazing players, but we weren't a band anymore, we were a corporation." What began as a tight blues rock group had become a brand carried entirely on his shoulders, and that realization marked the beginning of the end. Whitesnake wasn't just burning out, it was collapsing under the weight of its own success. As the 1990s began, the band's internal issues became impossible to hide. Coverdale's health problems and constant lineup changes left fans questioning stability, while critics accused them of prioritizing image over music, pointing to glossy MTV videos and the spotlight on Coverdale's relationship with Tawny Kitaen. Egos clashed not only among the musicians but also with managers and record executives. The demand for arena-sized hits put enormous pressure on Coverdale, who struggled to balance creativity with commercial expectations. The once celebrated chemistry had dissolved into business meetings, royalty disputes, and personal rivalries, and by 1991, the band splintered. Coverdale later said, "I had to walk away before it. Destroyed me completely. Collapse wasn't one dramatic explosion, but a slow unraveling caused by exhaustion, clashing personalities, and the impossibility of sustaining success at the highest level. For fans who watched Whitesnake rise to the top, it was heartbreaking as the band that promised rock immortality imploded. The collapse left the band and its fans reeling, with arena tours stopping and familiar faces scattering to other projects. Critics argued Whitesnake had become a one-man show. Others said the downfall was inevitable as glam metal faded in the shadow of grunge. For Coverdale, the consequences were personal. His high-profile marriage to Tawny Kitaen ended in a public divorce. His health remained fragile, and he was forced to rethink his entire lifestyle. Fans never fully let go, though. Radio kept the hits alive, and Whitesnake's downfall added to its myth, a band that flew too close to the sun and burned out spectacularly. In later years, Coverdale spoke openly about why Whitesnake fell apart. At 71, he admitted it was never one thing but a storm of egos, endless lineup changes, and the impossible task of sustaining success at the very top, saying it stopped being fun. And when the joy is gone, there's no point. Despite the collapse, his legacy remained secure. He occasionally revived Whitesnake with new lineups, drawing crowds eager to relive the glory days. Looking back, Whitesnake's story feels like a classic rock tragedy. Brilliant, explosive, and impossible to sustain. At their peak, they embodied 1980s excess, stadium tours, flashy videos, platinum records, and a frontman who commanded the spotlight. But that same excess became their undoing as endless lineup changes shattered. Unity and the demand for bigger success drained the joy from making music. Coverdale's honesty reveals the human side of the story, a man crushed by pressure and ego battles, forced to admit the band he built couldn't last forever. Yet the collapse didn't erase their legacy. It made it more powerful, a cautionary tale about fame becoming too heavy to carry, but also a celebration of music that still echoes decades later. Thanks for watching. Click here to check another video, and make sure to subscribe to our channel.